Hey folks, I finally have some memory space so I can shoot an actual video of this thing. We're here on our street rod project. I think we're entering about week 4, maybe 5 on this thing. I don't know. I'm somewhere around 75 hours, maybe 80 hours into this thing. I put the original front suspension back onto the truck frame with no springs in there right now so I can roll it around and move it, which is probably one of the biggest changes you'll see. But anyways, we've got the front suspension in place. We've got the body mounted to the frame now, and I'm starting to build a firewall. I'm having all kinds of trouble with some of my welding equipment that's been in storage forever, though, so that's been going slow. But as we see, we've got the body mounted to the frame and the starts of a firewall. Remember, we're using our original heater box here, so I did preserve the heater box section of the firewall there and the cowl intake for that air duct for the heater box. Our firewall is set up for the truck brake pedal tray, and for the truck steering column I've got yet to set up that particular mounting hardware, but next step is to finish up the firewall and then set the floors in and start in on the rear suspension. Yeah, we've got our mating between the two, the body and the frame started there. I've got some cleanup to do on that yet, and getting rid of some of the other sheet metal that is not needed, like these outside clips, and that will occur once I figure out exactly what I'm doing for the engine bay and the fender mounts and all of that. But we are making some progress here. The body is on the frame. The front suspension can bolt into place. I'm using the old suspension because right now I'm still welding on it and I don't want to, all my new stuff has nice fresh paint on it. So even though the new stuff would give me my 3-inch drop, because I've got the drop spindles and everything, I am better off with this suspension on it while I'm welding so I don't wreck all my clean parts and have to repaint everything. But just figured I would shoot a quick update. Obviously, I've still got some gaps to fill and some other stuff. You always want to make sure that you get your seam sealer out when you start doing these projects, though, because as you can see up here, I missed a spot where I was welding, and that stuff catches on fire really easy. So you always want to get your seam sealer out of the way and as much of the tar out of the way as you can, because that stuff is super, super flammable, which is the other reason that I like to gut the cars all the way, because if you didn't get everything out of the car, that little fire could have caught something else on fire and could have become a big ordeal. Instead, it was just a nuisance of a little bit of smoke rolling in the room. But then once we get the rest of the firewall and floors and body mated, then we will cut our rear tubs in and start working on that. So that is really the next step. But as you see, our frame is in place. And as I've said before, I'm moving the rear tubs back a foot from where they were on the original car. So that will all occur when I start messing with the rear suspension. And I did just give in. I was going to set this up on springs first and then do a spring with airbag assist. And because of the height that I am moving in the rear of this, I need 16 inches of active movement on my airbags. Since I plan to pull a heavy trailer with it, I need my bags to sit on top of the axle and not in the A-arm like they do on a lot of the lowriders. So I ended up getting some pretty large bags for it, so I'm going to have to put an air pressure regulator system and everything else in this, and probably a reserve tank for my bags and such. So that changed direction a little bit. That's like I say, never get too focused on one idea until you're ready to go with it, because things can evolve either because of lack of parts availability or cost of things, and that was my main controlling thing on this, was the air over spring setup that I wanted to build. The airbags for that were $170 a piece, and very occasional supply line on them. So by dropping the air over spring idea and going straight to commercial airbags for a large truck, I was able to get the stupid airbags for $55 a piece for the rear of this. And they're 13,000 pound airbags that have 18 inches of travel. So by going commercial, if I ever pop a bag, I don't have a sourcing problem. Anywhere that has truck parts for Kenworth, I can get those bags. And same is true with the front. I went with a standard airbag for the front rather than the commercially available lowrider stuff, because the commercially available lowrider stuff is insanely expensive. And obviously I don't care about some flashy name on a sticker. I care about functioning like a truck needs to function. So anyways, a little bit of a rambling. Kind of one of the fun things that's going on in our shop here, though, that like I say, my little Hobart here was acting up and my other Hobart was acting up and everything else. So I had to dig out my old Reliable here. I actually bought this one at auction about 5 years ago, but this is the same welder that I grew up with. My dad and I went and bought this welder back in the very mid 80s, around 86 or 87. We went and bought a Powcon welder. And this is kind of an icon in the welding world. These were inverter machines long before inverter machines were a thing. They kind of held the original patents on inverter welders. And later on, they got bought out by a co-op company with Miller and a few other companies involved in it. And they got dissolved as a company. And eventually, Thermaldyne ended up with their product line. But this little guy, like I say, these started in about 86 or 87. Powcon Company started in the very late 70s, but this inverter machine came out in about 86 or 87. So we're talking the same timeline as an Apple IIe computer or a Macintosh. And this is a 200 amp inverter machine. It will run on 220 power or three-phase, and it can... this has pulse arc in it as well as TIG. So this is a MIG TIG stick and pulse arc machine. And that pulse arc allows you to weld tinfoil like this really easily. You can put 030 wire in this and or 023 wire and weld two of the old steel soda cans together, and then flip the little switch on it and lay down a 1 inch wide by ½ inch thick or 1 inch wide by 3/4 inch thick bead just by flipping the switch and turning the dial. These things were insanely capable for their era, and it wasn't until about 10 years later that anybody else really started building inverter machines, and that's what our Miller over here is an inverter machine. But Powcon originated that, and unfortunately at the time that they came out with this machine, it was so, what would you call it, so unique and such a threat to the market that rather than everybody else try and compete with it, they kind of sank the company instead. And it was a real shame because that would have caused a real evolution in the market of welding. These kind of got a bad reputation for being unreliable, but really, if you ran it as an industrial welder and tried to push 80% workload out of it, yeah, you could overheat the power source pretty quick because it's a 200 amp machine and it's tiny, doesn't have a lot of heat dissipation. But at a 50% duty cycle or less, they're stupidly reliable. But what was less than reliable on these was the fact that they sold the units with a 100 amp gun on them. So it's a little automotive worker's gun on a 200 amp machine. And then it had a very small single side drive wheel. And I believe those parts were sourced from Century Welding. And so the drive wheel, feeder system, and the gun were kind of crappy on them. But the welders themselves were amazing, and if you took care of them, they're stupidly reliable. My dad's machine is still a very reliable machine, and I modified it to put a 15-foot gun on it. That single-side feeder does not like the 15-foot gun. You got to keep your consumables really clean with a 15-foot gun. But when it came around and I saw this one on auction, I went ahead and paid a pretty fair amount for this, just partially because of novelty, but also because it is an amazingly capable welder. And with the pulse arc on there, it's the perfect machine for doing auto body and stuff. So I just dug that one out of storage because my other auto body rigs were giving me trouble, and I figured I'd go back to the good old standby. But figured I'd throw in that little bit of useless information for you guys, you know, always trying to educate. But if you ever have the chance to come across a Powcon, if it's a running rig, it's well worth the money. I'm very happy with them, and they're kind of a time date stamp of an icon and quite a landmark in welding history. So anyways, that's a bit of history about welding, and this is a bit of a update on my street rod project. We're kicking along. I just moved my other Cadillac engine out. I've got three of them now, two 472s and a 500. Both the 472s were stuck when I got them. I got the second one freed up, the one that came in the really ugly Cadillac body. So that ended up, it took me a few days, but the old acetone and ATF, that worked well on that one. So I missed the days when .3 brake fluid worked, but they've changed the chemical mix of .3 brake fluid. So now acetone and ATF has been my go-to for freeing up engines. And it works really good as a penetrating oil too. So anyways, rambling on. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.